Live as of now. Hello everyone, welcome to the Deleuze and Guattari Quarantine Collective's ongoing reading of Anti-Oedipus, 2 hours late on a Saturday after taking a week off. Because, that's the way it works. Apologies for being late. We found out, because this economy is one where you want to learn that your landlords are increasing rent by a significant amount and are kicking you out. So we have 30 days to get the fuck out. Because I'm pretty sure they're selling the place. So that is a really fun week, as you may guess. So it's been a lot of stress and a lot of crazy shit, as it goes. Let me go ahead and pop this announcement into various things. How are you guys doing? Everyone here better? Doing all right? Acceptably? Doing generally acceptably? I'm glad.
Yeah, right.
There we go. Up. Oh, why did I ping? That's not what I wanted to do. I pinged Resi? That's the fucking stupidest fucking version of that message I could have done. That's funny that it's fucking Resi is that's what in the fuck, Brooks? You're just in a place today. That's okay. We are going to slowly actually get this reading going. We're in chapter 4 of Anti-Oedipus. We're slowly making our way through what is the second task. And when I say slowly, I mean fucking slowly making our way through the second task. Let's see. Where exactly did we leave off last week? I think we just literally got through the first 2 paragraphs. We might want to have to redo that. I think we were going to set up. Yep, that's my notes. My notes say we were going to redo all of that. So, let me share my screen here. Make sure we're doing a decent job of that. This is going to be a whole thing. But, boop. Oh, that's the setup. All right, let me. There. There we go. So it's been a fun few days. Let's see. Any housekeeping stuff for the QC? I don't think anything major today. We have a bunch of new readings starting. A bunch of people who are doing readings on secondary servers. We had Kent Palmer return, who's our friend on the Continental Philosophy server. And they're doing, as their thing, always very interesting readings worth checking out. But us, we are in chapter 4, section whatever the fuck it is. Making our way through the second positive task, section 5. Okay. As we made our way through all of this, desiring machines, the paralogisms, the syntheses, the nature of this sort of universal history of desire that is chapter 3, and ultimately into the tasks of schizoanalysis, which is intended to sort of reframe the conversation one might have when it comes to the analyst-and relationship of traditional psychoanalytic or counselor or psychiatric thought. They're asking, what if we were to take a different tactic? And what if we were to use all of this info and rebuild psychoanalysis in a new direction they call schizoanalysis, which, again, thanks to the connotations of schizophrenia and schizo, I fucking have a lot of issues with the phrasing. But hey, when I'm them, I get to write whatever the fuck book I want. The first destructive task of psychoanalysis is basically helping the analyst see through the symbolic connections or the way that they're utilizing symbolic relationships to predefine everything they do. The conditioning of language itself and how it has sort of frozen them and begun repressing them in an infinitude of ways. The first positive task is, as that's happening, and these happen together, there's no do step 1, step 2, step 3. It's not how anything works for these guys. The syntheses, there are 3. They're imminent to each other. It's not step 1, step 2, step 3, but these things sort of glom into each other very much. The second step, positive, is the determination or construction or the looking at of the indices of desire. Because as you're doing the destructive task, as you see where people are invested, where their investments lie, and you're doing away with the symbolic elements, again, don't fall back into the trap of, oh, they're into this symbolic thing, or they're into this actually. Instead, be watching for the general indices of where desire sits and where its sort of thrust is going, where it's repulsed, where it's attracted. And you can kind of create a mapping almost of that. The second positive task, though, which we haven't actually, I don't think, had fully stated quite yet, but it's making way even further with the way that desire works and understanding how between desire, the way that it works in the molecular regime of desiring machines, or the way that it works in the molar regime of social machines, that this is, however, just desire. And the importance for us to take these two poles and understand them not as two sides or dualities, but instead two ways that things sort of operate, and how in this operation, this creation, this ongoing production of things, the oscillation between them happens ultimately. As they say in this first paragraph, at times we contrasted the molar and the molecular as the paranoiac signifying in structured lines of integration. The schizophrenic, machinic, and dispersed lines of escape. They're open about how they've talked about these things as being different. Oh, we did it as the staking out of perverse reterritorializations, as the movement of the schizophrenic deterritorializations. At the other times, on the contrary, we contrasted them as the two types of equally social investments, one sedentary and biunivocalizing, reactionary and fascist, the other nomadic, polyvocal, and revolutionary. In fact, in the Schizoid Declaration, I am a race inferior for all eternity, I am a beast of black, we're all German Jews, the social historical field is no less invested than in the paranoiac formula, I am one of your kind. The placement of one as a minority, I am a black, is no different than I am a white, I am an Aryan, I am a Nazi. These things are invested in the same way, because we're talking about things in terms of the unconscious libidinal investments. We're talking about those things. So we're going to reread this second paragraph again, and maybe make our way to a third. I know everyone be very, very excited, just like I am, clearly. Clearly everyone's just very jazzed. No screen share today. I thought I screen shared. Oh, yep, I did. Good. So we might get through. No, we're probably only doing 2 paragraphs today. We might only end up doing 1. Because this second paragraph of chapter 5 sucks, or section 5, chapter 4 sucks in its length. It's very long. So we'll do what we did last time. I'll give it a read, and then we're going to go back through and make our way through every single point. And I hope all of you are ready for that shit, to say the least. From the viewpoint of the unconscious libidinal investment, all the oscillations from one formula to the other are possible. How can this be? How can the schizophrenic escape, with its molecular dispersion, form an investment that is as strong and determined as the other? And why are there 2 types of social investment that correspond to the 2 poles? The answer is that everywhere there exists the molecular and the molar. Their disjunction is a relation of included disjunction, which varies only according to the 2 directions of subordination, according as the molecular phenomena are subordinated to the large aggregates, or, on the contrary, subordinate them to themselves. At one of the poles, the large aggregates, the large forms of gregariousness, do not prevent the flight that carries them along, and they oppose to it the paranoiac investment only as an escape in advance of the escape. But at the other pole, the schizophrenic escape itself does not merely consist in withdrawing from the social, in living on the fringe. It causes the social to take flight through the multiplicity of holes that eat away at it and penetrate it, always coupled directly to it. Everywhere setting the molecular charges that will explode what must explode, make fall what must fall, make escape what must escape, at each point ensuring the conversion of schizophrenia as a process into an effectively revolutionary force. For what is the schizo, if not, first of all, the one who can no longer bear all that? Money, stock market, death forces. Nijinsky said values, morals, homelands, religions, and private certitudes. There is a whole world of difference between the schizo and the revolutionary. The difference between the one who escapes and the one who knows how to make what he is escaping escape, collapsing a filthy drainage pipe, causing a deluge to break loose, liberating a flux, resecting a schiz. The schizo is not revolutionary, but the schizophrenic process, in terms of which the schizo is merely the interruption, or the continuation in the void, is the potential for revolution. To those who say that escaping is not courageous, we answer, what is not escape and social investment at the same time? The choice is between one of two poles, the paranoiac counter-escape that motivates all the conformist, reactionary, fascising investments, and the schizophrenic escape, convertible into a revolutionary investment. Maurice Blanchot speaks admirably of this revolutionary escape, this fall that must be thought and carried out as the most positive of events. Quote, what is this escape? The word is poorly chosen to please. Courage consists, however, in agreeing to flee rather than live tranquilly and hypocritically in false refuges. Values, morals, homelands, religions, and these private certitudes that our vanity and our complacency bestow generally on us have as many deceptive sojourns as the world arranges for those who think they are standing straight and at ease among stable things. They know nothing of this immense flight that transports them, ignorant of themselves, in the monotonous buzzing of their ever-quickening steps that lead them impersonally in a great immobile movement, an escape in advance of the escape. Consider the example of one of these men who, having had the revelation of the mysterious drift, is no longer able to stand living in the false pretenses of residence. First, he tries to take this movement as his own. He would like to personally withdraw. He lives on the fringe, but perhaps that is what the fall is, that it can no longer be a personal destiny, but the common lot. End quote. In this regard, the first thesis of schizoanalysis is this: every investment is social and in any case bears upon a socio-historical field. It's a great paragraph. It is a fucking bear of a read, but it's fantastic. How does one liberate themselves of paranoia? You don't. We had someone who, if you want to go see how terribly you can take and read any of this, we had someone in theory chat arguing with myself and a handful of people about how absolute deterritorialization is the goal of Deleuze and Guattari, which is, I mean, it's just someone who doesn't understand the words that they're saying, to say the least. Let's start with the last point, because I think if we do that and make our way back, every investment is social and in any case bears upon a social historical field. The thing to remember as we do this, and as schizoanalysis happens, the first step, again, the destruction of the symbolic connections, relationships, and those things, mirrored with the understanding of the general investments and the repulsions and attractions of those things. James is in YouTube, and James was in that chat as well. This is literally, yes, James, this is basically the conversation we had in theory chat, and it's horrifying. But the first thesis is every investment is social, and in any case, bears upon a social historical field. Desire, as it's invested, doesn't happen in a vacuum. Like, just stay there. If we're talking about what we can do or how we can shift our paranoiac investments, it's like, okay, wait. What's a paranoiac investment? How does this set up? How does this work? How do you consider these things? How do you think through them? Well, you could make a huge mistake and say, well, then we just need to get rid of any idea of social historical connections at all and allow desire to just be desire. It's like, yeah, but how's that fucking work? Desire is the productive capacity of desiring machines, and you and all of us, and produces us in the social world. But desire doesn't exist outside of time, outside of space, outside of material things. It's not some ideation. If you treat it like an ideality, you're fucked. Instead, it is material. And as it produces, as it connects and disconnects, and as things happen, there are disconnections. There are connections to this. There are things that push on from there. And those things will form a social order. They will. We live in a society is not just the fucking meme. They're saying that here. Like, look, yes, so does desire. Desire, every investment of desire is social. And in any case, bears upon a social historical field. No matter what, always, it's desire being invested socially first, connecting first, building into these things first. Desire always is doing that. So there's no, well, let me get away from all this and just do desire. You won't, you can't. That's not going to how it works. Because that is where desire's invested. And it's not disconnected. Desire's there. Your desire is invested. It's gone. It's not like, oh, I've got my desire here, I'm going to go wander away. What does that even mean? Well, you can't. It is not a personal destiny, but the common lot, necessarily. Let me take a spin and try another way of describing this. Libertarians want to talk about how people just could be completely free. We just do away with all of the state organizations, hierarchy, all of those things, and everything will be good. Just a hyper-capitalist system with all that stuff. We just need to get rid of all the rules. But there are rules. Like, no matter what, right? We know this. We intrinsically know this because we exist in a society as people. We live in a place. We do things in a place. We do things with other people. There are social codes. There are axiomatics. There are rules. There are laws. There are things that bring us together. There isn't really a way to say, well, we're going to have a society without people. Right? Just as there's no way to say, oh, I'm going to exist without social investments or desire without investing in the social. It's always invested because that's what the social world is. There is no social world without desire because it is desire. It's a big shift. And they open up. They're like, the thing is from the position of the unconscious libidinal investment, the investment of desire that itself is unaware of anything in the real world. It doesn't have an idea of what man, woman, America, Iran, Israel, international politics or politicking or real politics or any of that shit. No clue. It's got no clue of any of that. From that position, every version from one to the other is possible. The ability for a revolutionary tendency inside of a reactionary system, a reactionary tendency inside of a revolutionary system, all of these, all the oscillations are possible. There's no reason that a person can't both put themselves in a position, and I think when I say this, you'll understand, I hope, very quickly you can somehow be a minority and a majority at the same time. People claim this. You can do this. People do this actively. This is a thing. The silent majority is somehow also the persecuted minority. You can always find ways to do this because this is how the oscillations work. All the oscillations are possible. How can a schizophrenic escape? All of this, it has molecular dispersion. How can these things form investments as strong and determined as the fascist? Why are there two types of social investments and two poles? Well, it's because everywhere, look around, also think of things, also whatever, everywhere, there is molecular and molar. The disjunction between the two, they slam together, okay? The disjunction is an included disjunction. Go read symbolic logic, go read Copy, go read Langer, go read other stuff. This is either or. There is no closed off. It can always connect. It can be an inclusive disjunction necessarily, because the way it works is more about the direction of subordination, where the molecular is subordinated to large aggregates, or the large aggregates subordinated to desiring production. Which one is powering? Which one's determinate? Which one is in control? It's tough to talk about molecular desire being in charge of the symbolic. We can very easily talk about the symbolic being in charge of the molecular. The way that we use language, if I say, be a man, there you go. The symbol, the story, that thing is made of desire. There's social investments happening right there with the unconscious, libidinal, machinic unconscious in that moment. But the idea of it, the symbol of the thing, the large aggregates of what these things mean on average, the story of that, the gregarious average, as they're going to call this, takes precedence over the emergent side of desire. On the other side, you can be descriptive and you can say, oh, looks like a man over there. Yeah, it's whatever you're saying. It's what you're seeing. You're just going with that. But it's subordinating. It's descriptive. It's not intended to be prescriptive. It's not intended to be determinate. There's a shift there. It's harder to talk about that second one. That's why they use tough language with it too. Because when we are there at one of the poles of this, the large aggregates, the large forms of gregariousness, the symbolic, the representational, they don't prevent the flight that carries them along. They oppose it to the paranoiac investment only as an escape in advance of escape. We'll come back to that because they use that phrase again. They come back to Blanchot, who actually uses it. You have that side. On the other side, the pole, the schizophrenic escape itself, does not merely consist in withdrawing from the social and living on the fringe. It causes the social to take flight through the multiplicity of holes that eat away at it and penetrate it. To say plainly, you becoming the schizophrenic, the break in yourself as an individual, unsocial, unable to connect with social life, the autistic in the corner rocking around. There is no revolutionary capacity in you because there is no social connections for you. You are broken, but you're someone who can't bear the world. You can't bear the social space. You've ever worked with people who are in this position. We have a couple neighbor kids actually who they're older and they're severely autistic, non-communicative mostly. They can't deal with the social world. They can't deal with anything at all. They don't connect to things that way. They are disconnected from the social. They can't, as they say here, one who can't bear money, stock market, death forces, values, morals, hormones, religions, private certitudes. That these things they can't, they shut down. But they're not changing any of it. Conversely, what if the schiz as a process was created in a way that allowed the crack to happen and allowed the entire system to escape with them? It's a revolutionary versus a schizophrenic. Schizophrenic is the breakdown, the one who can't do anything. The revolutionary is the one who knows how to make what he is escaping escape. It's an old Buddhist story about two. It's apocryphal. I don't think it's true, but there's these two sides. It's meant to be representational of sort of the two sides of Satori, so enlightenment. And there's two schools of monks. They were founded because two guys had a disagreement. One man said, "What am I if I become enlightened before everyone else?" And he made sure he dedicated his life to helping everyone else become enlightened so he could become enlightened. The other monk said, "But I already am one with everyone if I am enlightened. So if I become enlightened, everyone will be enlightened." That break, that thing they're doing, it's meant to point at a larger story, but it's not far. If you do the thing alone, but if you do the thing without yourself, if you break these things in half, if you don't handle things all at once, if you don't consider all at once, if you are not dealing with making you're escaping escape with you, then you are disconnected. Conversely, if you're doing the opposite and you're over-invested in the social space, you're not going to make anything escape at all. this this conversation is intended to sort of be that, where it's like, what are you doing? What is a schizophrenic doing? Well, this is like most people, like the plastic pills bullshit, like a lot of people that come out of this, and they're like, hey, you should be schizophrenic. You do weird things, it'll make weird things happen. It's like, no, literally they're saying not that. They're saying the revolutionary finds that odd middle place or odd way to sidestep that conversation of understanding that the desire that makes them up and that which they're able to affect is the very same desire that they are. That it's not about changing your internal so the external shifts. It's that all of it is one process. All of it is one process. All of it's one process. And it is meant to, and I know Ben's here wanting to scream at me, but it is meant to be more of a koan, the story I told of the two monks. It's meant to be something that you're supposed to, like, again, sit uncomfortably with, tarry with, and allow to sort of find that odd way that these things come together, because that's the point of what they're going over here at large. In Blanchot talks about this, the what is escape from society. It's not really about escaping. Hey, you can go live in a mountain, but what are you doing? Nothing. You can write a revolutionary book that no one reads. What are you doing? If you're not connected to the social space, if desire isn't part of it, you're forgetting that desire is part of it. Like, all of it is part of it. There is no breaking it. There is none. The mind-body dichotomy is the same as the desire-social dichotomy. The social world is desire, and desire is the social world. Their interactions are laid out here. And that's kind of where they're going for. Does that make sense to people? Am I generally not talking straight out of my own ass? Good, it makes sense. Yay! And you'll see a lot of people, and I would say a lot, I mean, just too many, who really go out of their way to say that, oh, he wants you to absolutely deterritorialize. He wants you to do this. Here, it's the self-help mentality, or the, even worse, the liberating your own desire mentality, which again becomes problematic and in kind of every way for how they're working through this. Because, to say again, just to go back, well, to go forward, and then we'll move to the next paragraph, thank God. The first thesis of schizoanalysis is this: every investment is social and in any case bears upon a social historical field. There is no desire investment that isn't already social. Godspeed. Have you seen that George Carlin joke about self-help books? Yes. It's The Paradox of Self-Help Books by George Carlin. If you have the motivation to buy the self-help book, good. You have the motivation to fix yourself. You don't have the motivation to fix yourself, you don't have the motivation to buy a self-help book. So if you buy it, good for you. You've helped yourself. You're fixed. Like, it's that this is not far away. It's that paradox of how these things are discussed that becomes sort of quasi-causative or break the way that desire emergently works is incredibly important. And again, it does come down, yes, it comes down to the classic dichotomy of man and nature, that or mind body or whatever. They're doing away with dichotomy, like effectively doing away with it altogether, because desire is everything, but everything is also desire. And here's how these things work, and here's how they interact, and we're talking about how they move and deal with each other in time. In the same way that our cities are nature, because they were built in the same way that you would say a bird's nest is in nature. You wouldn't say a bird's nest is artificial or a beaver dam. A city is literally no different. But we do that. We create these dichotomies. And again, it's all the same problem. We like problems. We think they're fun. They're our favorite fucking thing, apparently. So. Anyone else have a thing? Yes, if you get a book written by someone else, it's not self-help. That's just help. There's a Mitch Hedberg has a few lines about that too. But it's again, underlying, and the point of this, because it's going to be important, it's going to be really important for this next couple paragraphs, is that line. Every investment, investment, which is desire investing, every investment is social. Desire doesn't invest in non-social things. Desire's investing and working as part of that investment in the social, and always bears upon a social historical field. There's no separating out the social historical from the now or what's happening. That's a short version. Yeah. All right. I'll leave it for a moment awkwardly. If anyone has a thing, you're free to let me know. Any comments, any questions before we start moving forward? Because it's going to be very interesting from here. I can plug desire machines through this, right? He isn't specifically speaking only to a person. I mean, the answer would be yes to both. He is speaking directly to people and also to desire machines, because there is no difference. But there is a difference. It's a difference in process and time and how these things impinge on each other. But yes, very much. People being the schizo process break, or not. Or not. Or not. It's open. Let's move to the next paragraph. Let's see. Oh, we got a couple. Let's see. Feels very implicative from Deleuze's understanding of the past as contemporaneous with the present. Deleuze works with time in some really interesting ways. The cinema image of time image is one thing, but that stems from a lot of his stuff stems from a sort of rereading of Bergson's Time, where for Deleuze, logic of sense, he goes into it, difference repetition, he talks about this as well. And as I always mention, Corey Shore's blog, which if you look around, you'll find it somewhere in the server, I'll repost it after the reading, goes into the Stoic idea of time. Which is a very particular reading from Goldschmidt on this, and Deleuze takes a lot from that. But he sees time as two parts. This is, again, Nietzsche married to Bergson, basically. There is time in the sense of how we talk about it in terms of measured, sliceable time. 5 minutes from now, the next hour, tomorrow, these slices of time. 5 minutes from now, right now, like immediate, all of these things. But there's also the other time that's layered into that. And layered into that is what we would call the experience of time, as more Bergsonian kind of style, the way time works. Because when we go through life, there's kind of this treadmill of time we're always existing in that sometimes we reach the end of. We reach the end of the treadmill and we kind of think elsewhere about other times, and then we find ourselves back in the middle of the treadmill, and there's this oscillation between the two. The way that time functions inside of this is that same implication. This stems heavily from his talks with Klosowski, I'm learning, where we talk about the oscillation between the model of things, how we see things, the memory of it, the investments of that, versus the emergent world in front of us, and that the oscillation between these two that's happening, and we're talking about oscillation because it's in hertz or kilohertz, it's crazy fast. On top of the sort of third-person view we have of that situation, all of this complexity creates the experience we have and the way we grow from it. What about the guy that carved poems in the mountains in China that he never intended people to see? But they did, and we're sharing it now. So, even if he never intended, so the story goes. And again, let's say I paint a beautiful piece of art I never want anyone to see, and I bury it or I burn it. That doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a social action or social activity or involve other people. The act of investment itself. Investment itself is inherently social. He still carved it into a mountain. Why did he carve it into a mountain? What is the investments that were causative of this? What did desire put together that made these things happen, or that were these investments? Well, they're social. He did all of these things because of the social historical field that he existed in. Whether or not he's interacting, that's irrelevant to it. What that's relevant to is the other half of the conversation, where they're like, hey, you get to escape, that's great, but if you don't bring anyone with you, you're not really escaping. You need to bring that along. So it's a slightly different play. Yeah, it's a duration for Bergson, but aeon and chronos for Deleuze is the terms he tends to use. And so it's worth reading through. But to go, you're going to see the word gregarious in here. Gregarious would be, gregariousness is the way that things behave or seem to behave at scale. The herd instinct. Gregarious, large form, outward acts. It's going to be important. We'll get there, but it'll be important to just say that up front. Let us recall the major traits of a molar formation, or of a form of gregariousness, or herd instinct. They affect a unification, a totalization of the molecular forces through a statistical accumulation obeying the laws of large numbers. This unity can be the biological unity of a species, or the structural unity of a socius. An organism, social or living, is composed as a whole as a global or complete object. It is in relation to this new order that the partial objects of a molecular order appear as a lack, at the same time that the whole itself is said to be lacked by the partial objects. In this way, desire will be fused to lack. The myriad breaks flux that determine the positive dispersion in a molecular multiplicity are fitted over vacuoles of lack that perform this fusion in a statistical constellation of a molar order. Freud demonstrated clearly in this respect how one went from psychotic multiplicities of dispersion, founded on the breaks or the schizzes, to large vacuoles determined globally, of the neurosis and castration type. The neurotic needs a global object in relation to which the partial objects can be determined as lack, and inversely. But on a more general level, the statistical transformation of molecular multiplicity into a molar constellation is what organizes lack on a large scale. Such an organization belongs essentially to the biological or social organism, species, or socius. There is no society that does not arrange lack in its midst by variable means peculiar to it. These means are not the same, for example, in a despotic type of society or a capitalist society where the market economy raises them to a degree of perfection unknown before capitalism. This welding of desire to lack is precisely what gives desire collective and personal ends, goals, or intentions, instead of desire taken in the real order of its production, which behaves as a molecular phenomenon devoid of any goal or intention. There's a lot of dense shit in there. The production of lack is big. We're going to go through this line by line, but I kind of want to talk about lack. A lot of thinkers put lack first. That lack is inherent to things. You're inherently missing something. For Lacan, the mirror stage puts people in a realization that they can't ever fully symbolically grasp the totality of things. So necessarily they are immediately now lacking because they exist in a symbolic space rather than just the immanent dealings with things that babies have. Babies just immanently deal with things. They don't really have that step. That step is lack. All right, there we go. Lack, and lack creates desire for Lacan. Or is generative of desire. I should be more specific with my terminology. That's fine. But lack, it's kind of a funny thing. It's more, and they go through this the whole in its parts. Chapter 2 is hugely about lack. Hugely about lack. There's this funny thing that happens, though, because we have all of the parts and we have the big organism at the top. I am a person. I'm a person. But I'm not exactly a person, right? Like, what's a person? Like, what's the hypernormative symbolic position of a person? May not be me. It's not like I'm missing like big things, but some people are. Some people miss a leg. Are they still a person? Some people miss multiple legs. Sometimes there's conjoined twins. Sometimes there's little people. There's all kinds of stuff where it's like, are they a person? But they don't really fit. They're missing something. There's like a lack in that built into the way that we talk about the large gregarious things. You're a human, you're a person, you're a man, you're a woman, whatever these things are. There's a lack built into that because you're not really just that. There's more happening. There's more happening on that way. And conversely, if we look at only all the parts you are, you're also lacking other things to, like, it works both ways. So for them, lack is produced by how things come about. The emergent process of desire eventually does create some semblance of language or symbolic structure in the social field, as we've learned through the book. I'm not revisiting all that. And that language does really weird shit by sort of producing lack. And that lack seems to give all of us goals. So now to go through it, they are asking us, they want us to go back to talk about the traits of a molar formation. They use the examples of species or we'll get there. But like the first thing is about the molar, organized structures. What we recognize as a coherent whole. If you go read the Dan Smith paper on the body without organs, the body without organs exists to find a way to reconcile what seems to be the molecular and the molar, the organism and its parts, its machinic parts. This is what the BWO does. But we tend to think of coherent wholes. There's the organism. There is America. There is white guy. There is Brooks, whatever it is. This thing is sort of more built into the forms of gregariousness. This comes from Nietzsche. This is a mass psychology thing. This is Reich, Nietzsche, a handful of others. But again, talking about this as an organizing thing, right? They affect unification, a totalization of molecular forces through a statistical accumulation obeying the laws of large numbers. Okay. Molar formations aren't made of nothing. They don't come or create themselves. It's not really how it works. What they are made of is molecular flux and flows of desire, molecular flux of desire, the social investments of things. This flux happens through sort of a, as they say, a statistical aggregation, is the word they've used. They really are pushing towards that. We want to talk about here, and again, Deleuze pulls from a lot of shit, but we're talking about like the nature of mathematically, fucking thermodynamically, biologically. We're going to be pulling from so many things here, but like ultimately the chaos of the molecular, the multiplicity of the molecular becomes ordered in the molar through probabilistic captures. It's not really a synthesis of these things, but it's one capturing the other. Laws of large numbers, for example, is the way that in emergence, the law of large numbers, eventually there will become order. And that's kind of the idea. There's not a flux. We're not talking about a desire flux becomes stuff. You're talking about an infinitude of this, a chaosmosis of extraordinary things, the scale of which is really hard to get people to understand. I've been having this trouble with AI recently where I'm trying to get people to understand that literally every conversation we're having, every sentence generally has mostly been said and an AI has in their memory. And it's like, it's hard to get people to understand the scale of shit that has been written on the internet. You're talking about 10, maybe 20 trillion pieces of written content in one form or another. That doesn't even make sense mathematically, I think, for people to grasp. But we're talking about numbers much more than that. The number of molecules that make you up is of orders magnitude more. Like, you're a very complicated thing. You're a very annoyingly complicated, atomized thing. Desire is too. At large, these things tend to coalesce into aggregates. It's a law of large numbers thing. It's a Boltzmann thing. So when we start talking about, yeah, we're all annoying things. I'm a very annoying thing. Trust me. I'm a very annoying thing, but it's that thing, the machinic connections and disconnections that are happening again, incredibly quickly, beyond measurement, but also producing desire. This mass process, you aren't like 10 of them. Even if I were to say you're thousands of them, it's not really that. You're far more than that. All of those that are going, they don't really have an order, but in large numbers, we kind of find that they sort of do. Right? Like, that's what they're driving at. That's what they're driving at, is and large. There's the law of large numbers is this idea in physics of emergence theory that kind of works, and it kind of makes sense intuitively. If we have a whole bunch of particles of things, they tend to, they may be in chaos, but over time and in large numbers, they do things with each other that makes things happen. There's a reason they're using these terms from other disciplines, because they're pulling from those things a lot. With desire, it's the same thing. And that unity that comes from it, that's the next line. This unity can be the biological unity of a species. It could be the structural unity of the socius. It can be an organism, social or living. These things composed as a whole, as a global or complete object. You are now a person. But we know that actually I'm a lot of biological mechanisms at once. I'm a fuck ton of them, and that's what's actually making me. I am my gut biome as much as my gut biome is me. We know this, again, scientifically, but totally everyone, no one says, hello, Brooks, your gut biome, all of the different bacteria. Like, you say, what's up, Brooks? Because there's a global person. There's a thing there that's complete or seemingly complete. Again, they're not saying that they're not saying not to think about that. They have names. They're not trying to get us to all become schizo. Fucking, I hate that I have to fucking say these things every fucking time. Fucking hate that I have to say these things every fucking time. But that's the deal. So this thing that happens, though, this global object, they say, it is in relation to this new order that the partial objects of a molecular order appear as a lack at the same time that the whole itself is said to be lacked by the partial objects. This is the whole in its parts. They use the example in that, and I'm going to, every time I come up with this, I don't think there's a better example. Proust, In Search of Lost Time, is a prime example of this. Proust, In Search of Lost Time is a bunch of different books and a bunch of different stories. None of the stories are really the whole story. And there's actually a Monty Python sketch called Summarizing Proust Competition, where no one's able to summarize In Search of Lost Time because it doesn't work like that. It is a whole that is also the parts, because the parts make up the whole. But that's not how we usually think of things. That's their point here. Brooks, or a person, right? This new order, the partial objects of molecular appear as a lack. The parts of me that are not that, or that are missing things or anything like that, because the whole person symbolically necessarily has those things missing, seems like a lack. At the same time, the whole, Brooks, is the thing that is lacked in the molecular, because the molecular doesn't have like, oh, this is, hello, I am Brooks's desiring machine. That's not how that works. It's just desiring machines. They lack the whole, and the whole necessarily also doesn't have, like, it's fucked. One of the great novels of the 20th century. It's one of the greatest things ever written. It's one of the best pieces of work that has ever been made. I highly recommend In Search for Lost Time. I highly recommend it. I've not read the whole thing more than, I think I've read it 1.5 times. I've read Swan's Way many times because I like it. Everyone will have their own opinions. It's phenomenal. It's a genuine masterwork, though. But that's kind of their point, is we have this weird thing we've worked ourselves into because the representational space seems to control us, because we kind of work in a very strange way. When we talk about stuff, any of those things seem to actually be lacking when it comes to what that thing is, thanks to the way that it's made of smaller pieces. Conversely, the smaller pieces, when we only look at them, are lacking the whole. And that's kind of a fucked up way to look at it, because what this does is they say, because of this, desire is fused to lack. That's the deal. In this way, desire is fused to lack, because the only way we've been able to bridge, or consider to bridge, the pieces and the whole is in this weird inverse relationship of lack. And because of that, we can only regard things as lack or lacking. And so desire is fused necessarily to it over time. These things go huge. You can summarize Swan's way. A guy thinks about going to bed, goes to bed, wakes up, drinks tea, rides train, reads the newspaper. A guy is confused. There, I just summarized Proust. A guy is confused. It is more than that, but again, it doesn't do it justice. It can't, because everything is both the whole and its parts, and the whole is actually a part made alongside the other parts. But again, this is what we're talking about here, is the way that these two regimes seem to control each other or determine each other. And that's the deal. Desire in this way becomes fused to lack. So they say, the myriad breaks flux that determine the positive dispersion in a molar multiplicity are fitted over vacuoles of lack that perform this fusion in a statistical constellation of a molar order. This is saying long and complexly the actual process I was just referring to, but effectively, the basic units of production, desires as machines that the flux breaks, does things, produces new connections happen. This affirming, productive character of the process paves over these bits. It fits over vacuoles of lack that perform this fusion in a statistical constellation of a molar order. This is how we actually get there. The empty spaces actually have an organizational function. The vacuoles of lack is a physicality of them. It's an affirmative negation. It's really fucking hard to talk about in a way that's not going to itself necessitate like an incredible rambling, but that's what they're saying, that Deleuze basically doesn't have a negative, not in the same way that Hegel does, and not in the same way others do. It is a Spinozist through and through. It is an affirming base of difference. There is no such thing as a negative in the sense of a negative emptiness where there is nothing, a true vacuum. It's not really how it works. For him, those vacuums were mistaking, because what they are is actually an affirmatively created vacuole of lack. It's a piece that has been built. It is a vacuum that has been made into that space. That's the deal. Cells have, and that's the term vacuole of lack. It's the point. The empty spaces in your body. There are places in your body that aren't filled with things. Did you know this? And it's not just your lungs or other stuff. There's other little weird pits and shit and stuff between vacuoles. Vacuoles organize. They help you have the form that you have. They do things. They aren't productive biologically explicitly, but they are there. Vesicles as well. There's a lot of stuff that is kind of a weird empty space, but the weird empty space isn't nothing. It does stuff. It helps the organizational process. It helps you be a person who can stand. Your bone has empty pieces. If it was solid, you'd have a very different biology. But that's the idea, is these empty spaces basically in biology or in physics, because again, nature abhors a vacuum is a cute way to put it, but the vacuums is kind of a tough thing to talk about it. People tend to think of our atmosphere on the planet as though it's like a flat line, as though like there's an area like the surface of a water that like oh, you can punch through it and like on the other side. It's like, no, there's like shit just gets really, really, really thin and technically just gets thinner and thinner and thinner until it's basically nothing. Like the vacuum of space is like close, but even then the vacuum of space is the organization of other objects. It serves a purpose. It's productive in its own way. It's kind of a really fucking weird thing. And so instead of thinking about it conceptually as a negative of emptiness, of nothing, it's actually, think of it as produced nothingness that helps organize desire at a molar level. That's what they're saying here. It helps desire organize at the molar level. Lack isn't bad. It's not a negative. Repression also, by the way, is not bad. This is not an ethical or moral discussion. This is how these things work. It's how these things work. And they actually go so far back to actually go, well, actually, we got this from Freud. like, this is Freud, guys. Guys, this is Freud. This is Freud, guys. Freud demonstrated clearly in this respect how one went from psychotic multiplicities of dispersion founded on the breaks or schizzes to large vacuoles determined globally of the neurosis and castration type. The neurotic needs a global object in relation to which the partial objects can be determined as lack, and inversely. I mean, this is Freud talking about psychosis. They're straight up just quoting and talking about Freud here, which is, again, not a thing they do a lot. But they're like, hey, look, the way that psychosis works, we tend to talk about it as like a fragmentation of things that's pathological. But if we talk about this in terms of like the productive reality, you end up in this weird place where schizzes, this breaks of things, these are actually creative breaks ups instead of breakdown. We think of breakdown as the ending or stopping of a machine, the end of a thing. But think of it as breaking up, where things are broken and then reconnected. As we've talked about, this is desiring production. Neurosis, which is a big deal for Freud and psychoanalysis, is this really odd molar capture of all of this, all the flux around any object into a global object. This is the way a neurotic demands or makes everything fit, even if it really, really doesn't. And that is the thing they're playing with. Because again, the neurotic needs a global object in relation to which the partial objects can be determined as lack. And it needs partial objects that can be determined as lack in order to have a global object. Inversely. The characteristics of that relationship. Global objects need partial objects as much as partial objects need global. They need each other for the neurotic to function. That's basic Freud. Basic Freud. Could you say lack is nothing and desire is something? Nope, because lack is enough. They use the term vacuole, but lack is something. Even if it's an affirming thing, it's an affirming thing that is something. So it's saying it's nothing presumes an emptiness, but lack is produced in the process. There is no lack. There is no empty spaces in desire predeterminately. It's only in the organization of things. It's only in the organization of things that we find lack, but lack enables the organization of things and is part and parcel of what organizing means. You can't have a painting that is all the colors in all the spaces. You can't have a book that is all the letters in all the spaces and all the ink in every fucking piece of paper. The emptiness enables the structure. The lack is part and parcel of the framing and the creation of anything, and it's anything social. Desire doesn't lack on its own. It has no lack. It doesn't lack whole objects. Whole objects are emergent. They don't lack it. But we see that. We tend to think of it as like, oh, look, your desires aren't full enough. You don't want to have a family. You don't feel compelled to be a man. You don't feel compelled to be stoically. Your desire is lacking what the whole is, and the whole is lacking what your desires are. It's fucked up. But to continue, on a more general level, The statistical transformation of molecular multiplicity into a molar constellation is what organizes lack on a large scale. So this is, this is what this is the whole paragraph. This is actually the whole paragraph. On a more general level, let me just say this simply and then continue to write confusing, long-winded things. But they're making specificity, but still, it's like the way that things, the constellation, the arrangement, and the arrangement is kind of the big deal here, the arrangement of things, right? The molar arrangement is what organizes lack on a large scale. The statistical transformation of molecular multiplicity into molecular, let me say it again. The statistical transformation of molecular multiplicity into a molar organization, a molar arrangement, a molar constellation is what organizes lack on a large scale. Meaningful arrangements of things illuminate past and present configurations. This is Benjamin's idea of constellation here, sort of playing through. This is, there's a lot that's coming into this. But the first one I think about that they're using constellation, it makes me want to go back and see if they're doing it in the French, because every time the answer is no, but we'll just go with it because it does kind of work. That movement where we've got the arrangement of things, that arrangement is meaningful, and necessarily it is what organizes lack on a large scale. That transformation of the actual molecular multiplicity into that arrangement. And this organization, such an organization, belongs essentially to the biological or social organism, species or socius. They're being very specific here. This is not like contingent historical developments that is doing this. They're being very, very broad here. They're talking about organic as a thing, the organization, organic organization of things. This is that. The species or socius, the nature of the organism, the organic. And again, this is to go back to Dave Smith's amazing piece on the body without organs, which I'll put in here afterwards. I think he would agree with this statement. The whole thing is about that. It's about how an organized things, an organism, an organ, see organ, I put emphasis on organ, so do they throughout it, but the organization of things at large, that's the thing that they're pushing. This isn't a transcendent lack, but imminent to natural material organization that allows the organic, the organ, the organism, the organization to happen materially. Jimbo is no. So yin and yang definitely isn't the same thing as material and molar. They molecular and molar. Sorry, material. Fucking Brooks. I need to finish my tea. Yin and yang. How the Westerners deal with yin and yang, and I think pop philosophy globally has kind of fucked this, even amongst people who have lived in these cultures, is the white and the black as two sides of a coin. It's like, that still is separate. The yin and yang, like the whole point of yin and yang is sort of to talk about these things as being one and the same process. It's visualized as black and white or whatever, and that there's white and black and black and white. But it's not meant to be, oh, these things are always together. It's that there is no difference and that you're seeing the same. There's a reason that they use molecular and molar. If I have a mole of carbon, do I not have any molecules of carbon? They are both molecules of carbon and a mole of carbon at the same time. It's purely about how I talk about it. It's purely about how we regard it. And that regarding is actually what enables us to have an understanding of what we'll do with it and to do things. That has to happen at the molar level, the organized level, the organism level, the social historical level, necessarily. Molecules don't fucking have, there's nothing we can do with a molecule. Not how it works. There's nothing we can do with a desiring machine. Desiring machine, there's nothing, doesn't fucking care. It's just doing whatever it's doing. But if I'm going to say to you, hey, I'm going to talk about blah stuff. When I talk about stuff, I'm talking about things in very specific ways. I'm talking about the molar. I'm talking about the molecular. I'm talking about the global-local duality of things, but I am giving privilege to one. Necessarily, that's how language works. The example Deleuze loves that I love too, which is the surgeon who uses a scalpel. We can be saying just as easily that the surgeon cuts skin with a scalpel, or we can say the surgeon is dulling the scalpel with skin. Both are actually absolutely accurate. There's no difference. They have drastically different senses of meaning, though. And in the same way, when I'm talking about the molar of stuff or the molecular, I'm talking about the same stuff, but by putting a different stank on it when I say it, by putting those different words, I create secondary intentions or inferences around it that produce lack in the conversation necessarily. Because again, how the molar works. Like, this discussion is actually a perfect example of what they're talking about in this paragraph. The statistical transformation of molecular multiplicity into molar constellations is what organizes lack on a large scale. And such an organization belongs to biological or social organisms, species or socius. There is no society that does not arrange lack in its midst by variable means peculiar to it. Right? All societies organize lack. They do it different ways. There's different mechanisms and setups, but the organization is there. That's to have a society. You need the organization. You need the organs. You need the things in the organs. You need the cells of the like. There you go. This historical materialism that they're playing here of desire, this claim flows through the rest of the book. This is how we get to different social formations that correspond to organizations of lack and production socially. This is how we get to capitalism. And then they say these means are not the same in a despotic type or in a capitalist society, blah, blah, blah. They're explaining primitive societies organized through debts and alliances and affiliations. Despotic societies do this through transcendent signifier, effectively, through unbridled political power. The capitalist societies does it through market abstractions and axiomatics, at everything becoming exchangeable, quantifiable, and lacking. But all of these are doing the same thing. They are organizing lack. And they say this welding of desire to lack is precisely what gives desire collective and personal ends, goals, or intentions, instead of desire taken in the real order of production, which behaves as a molecular phenomenon devoid of any goal or intention. This is the political thrust here. And there's a lot of ways to take it. I'm going to give my interpretation. Anyone else is free to sort of tell me where I'm fucking wrong. You could say, oh, look, desire is lack creates subjects with goals, but what we need to do is we need to start looking at getting rid of lack. Or lack is what enables collective action, and we need to understand that. Sure, all of this. There's a really odd play they're making there. Because goals, personal intentions, these things, one, you can't know everyone else's. Two, yours and goals kind of have built into them the social field necessarily. These things are there. Desire isn't free to be emergent fully as long as there are goals and intentions and personal wants or ends that are in there. But at the same time, if desire is just doing whatever desire is doing and is not connected to the social space, the fuck are you doing? You're just going off and living in a cave, or you're, in an asylum, or, in a home somewhere because you don't deal with anything. So what's the setup they're making? They're being, in my opinion, fairly clear. This desire is lack is creating the subject with goals, intentions, and purposes. Absolutely. This is the foundation of like an individual psychology, but it's marrying it with a collective politics. That the underlying desire here that is happening, though, is also pure production without predetermined ends. This is bringing, I've been doing ethics a lot the last 2 weeks. So this is like Spinoza's conatus, or the will to power. This is these things. Desire is still going. It's still doing its stuff. Desire is lack is a subject with goals, but desire is still doing its thing. It doesn't have lack. This is only the subject that ends up experiencing it. So the question would be then, how do we exist and do things if we are subjects that have desire as lack, and we are created with goals, intentions, and purposes, And we are built and we are ongoingly pushed into goals, intentions, and purposes. How can we deal with this and have a revolutionary politics in that space? That's the question I would believe that we should be asking. They don't answer it here. They answer it soon, but they don't answer it here. This is the question, as far as I'm concerned, they're pushing. As I read it. Anyone have a thought, comment, anything? Verse says, the core goal of many religious endeavors is to pursue the lack of desires, which can be confused with desire to lack. It's actually, religion here, I've always thought, is a really interesting way to sort of talk about their project. Because I think there is one of the reasons, just take Christianity as a thing. It's a story of a poor carpenter who gave everything up in order to help his brothers and humanity understand that they can be taking care of each other. We can live in a different world. But is the giving up the thing? Is the giving up the thing? Are we mistaken the end for that? The stories of the ascetic wise man, the Zarathustra types who live in a mountain and find Satori, enlightenment, God, burning bush, whatever. These things about giving up everything and having this lightning bolt. The question for me is always the same. And it's like, but if that's the case, then why yet is it easy for me to see how these things get perverted and turned around, even amongst atheists, amongst everyone? It's extraordinary, to being one where it's about lacking in specific ways, actually, in ways only I know, and not all of the ways. And also finding lack in various ways, but also having a bunch of stuff. And I want to have a bunch of stuff and get my rewards. And also, because to me, religion in a lot of these ways operates at a razor's edge that's playing towards what is, I believe, a general feeling people have, that they know that stuff isn't the deal, but getting rid of the stuff isn't also the deal. It's not the thing that will automatically do it. Here's 12 things you can do. 12 steps to being purely the best thing that's ever lived is not like a real list of things. 12 steps to becoming schizophrenic, 12 steps to emancipating society. These aren't really things that exist. And the goal of emancipating society is troublesome as well. It's tough. So how do you do it? Yeah, 12 rules for life. I got YouTube and Discord. Both of you people type that shit at the same time. I may have been making a comment about Jordy Peter. But it's tough. Because they're going to get into it. I believe that they answer it in the rest of this section. But I think that is the fundamental question that a lot of people are dealing with. How do we build a society and work together to do things and fix stuff, because everything is broken? And we have this fucked up thing where we have, as they say, desire to lack. This welding is precisely what gives desire collective and personal ends, goals, and intentions. Instead of desire taken as an emergent thing, where it behaves as a molecular phenomenon devoid of goals. This trick that's being played on desire, how do we enable that or fix that without abandoning society? Because we live in a society meme. I'm going to say Jordy Peters, because I like Jordy. I like the name Jordy Peter. And I can't say Jordan Peterson anymore, because now I've made the joke too many times about how his daughter married someone named Jordan. And I can't say his full name without physically cringing. Olivia says, so is desire to lack in this context a kind of repression or blocking up of desire machines? Yes. The desire to lack welding. The mistake of the mistake of things is that the organization, which necessitates lack, that again, vacuoles of lack are part of what allow an organization. Everything can't be doing something. There's got to be space. There's got to be structure. This is Marx all the way through. This is biology. This is like, there's got to be space. Everything isn't something. The space that is neutral enables other things to interact in different ways. So you need that for larger interactions. Sure. But at the same time, that seems to give this collective goal or this falling back on thing that an organism does where it claims all of the things for itself. And even such, the lack becomes desire itself. So it's a challenge. But don't worry. They do answer. I wasn't joking when I said that. We're going to be getting there. But this is, to me, and again, I would say this is the thrust of the thing too. Keep that conversation in your mind would be what I would say as we go through. The next bit is another smaller paragraph, which is great. And then we've got some Nietzsche, which is great. We might do 2 more paragraphs today. How exciting is that? Is everyone grasping what I'm talking about at this point? Various Munakden, original sin is the same as lack. It might depend on how you mean that. I would end up having more complex conversation with myself over that point in general. But I would say it's not one-to-one on its face. If we talk about the nature of original sin as it functions in Christian or Catholic methodology is not so much a lack as much as it is an affirming crush or an affirming repression, that you are affirmatively evil. The original sin is basically that you're born broken. But that's not what they're saying here, that organisms aren't born broken. It's a misunderstanding of the vacuoles and lack as not just part of the building process. If you're building a Lego car or you're building a car, you don't make it out of one solid piece of clay unless you're sculpting a model. A single piece can't make a car. The missing pieces, the emptiness, is what's necessary for wheels to move, for gears to turn, for all these other things. The emptiness is there. The emptiness is part of it. It's one of the really tough things about design. If you ever go to design school, you take proper design classes. One of the hardest things to sort of wrap your head around is that you are actually working with negative space. Negative space would be a better way to talk about it than lack, because that's what it is. It's negative space, but negative space makes the image as much as positive space does. Lack makes you as much as desire does. They're all produced, but they all make you. And they're all necessary. But, you see, Kanye West bought this stunningly beautiful house from a very famous architect that had a shit ton of negative space. And they did negative space specifically with glass in some really clever ways. He went around with a hammer and he destroyed all of it and then replaced it with like really ornate golden. It's ugly as shit because, again, the negative space is what made it as much as anything else. And it's tough to talk about negative spaces being created, but it is as part of the process. Emptiness is part of it. Hope that makes sense because we're making forward and it's kind of continuing that same point. Nor must it be thought that the statistical accumulation results from chance, or that it is a random result. This accumulation is, on the contrary, the fruit of a selection exerting its force on the elements of chance. When Nietzsche says that the selection is most often exerted in favor of like large number, that's not EK large number, I don't know what the fuck, this awful PDF. He inaugurates a fundamental intuition that will inspire modern thought. For what he means is that the large numbers, or the large aggregates, do not exist prior to a selective pressure that might elicit singular lines from them, but that, quite on the contrary, these large numbers and aggregates are born of this selective pressure that crushes, eliminates, or regularizes the singularities. Selection does not presuppose a primary gregariousness. Gregariousness presupposes the selection and is born of it. Culture, as a selective process of marking or inscription, invents the large number in whose favor it is exerted. That is why statistics is not functional but structural and concerns chains of phenomena that selection has already placed in a state of partial dependence, Markov chains. This can even be seen in the genetic code in other terms. In other terms, forms of gregariousness are never indifferent. They refer back to the qualified forms that produce them by creative selection. The order is not gregariousness selection, but on the contrary, molar multiplicity, forms of selection performing the selection, molar or gregarious aggregates that result from this selection. How genetics works. Literally, this is it. People think, like, looking at me, they go, oh, we could just clone Brooks by taking his DNA and putting it over here. No, not really. Like, DNA is a part of it, sure. But it's not that this Brooks determined what the DNA selected. It's actually not how it works. DNA doesn't have this image at all. None of the biology does. My mom's tummy didn't. My dad's sperm hit their genes. Not how it works. Instead, all of it is in this molecular multiplicity. And in that multiplicity, that chaos of biology and crazy shit and food and weather and humidity and stress and all kinds of things, that is the biological reality that I was born into and that I grew in, where house or food or money or neighborhood or air quality, all of it, all these things. The forms of selection performing the selection is that next step. And from this, the molar or gregarious aggregates result from that selection. Susan Oyama, Evolution's Eye, and the Ontogeny of Information goes over this very, very nicely. The idea of how we talk about DNA being the process, it's not. It's part of it, but if DNA doesn't have the things it's kind of ready to go with, it's not like it goes, all right, I'm done. It's generative. Necessarily, it builds what it builds. And people turn out a lot of different ways because of that. A lot of different ways. But the DNA didn't choose this, and the DNA also didn't get it wrong. It's not really how it works. It's all the parts together. We're going to come back to that because this paragraph's pretty great. Nor must it be thought that the statistical accumulation results from chance or that it is a random result. This is not random. This is not Brownian motion. We just happen to build into this certain thing. We just happen to end up in these positions. Ever. It is not that. It's not hyperdeterminist, but it's not this random result. This is not statistical mechanisms of chance and bullshit. They referred to it a little bit earlier, but they're being very, very specific here. This is not that. This is not semantics. This is theoretical stakes. This is not random. This accumulation is on the contrary, because again, it's not chance or random. This accumulation is on the contrary, the fruit of a selection exerting its force on the elements of chance. It isn't so much, how to put it. It's not that there's no chance, but it's the way things happen to come together and the selection process within that. This is neat. This is Nietzsche. This is just fucking so much Nietzsche. And again, Susan Oyama, please go read. Susan Oyama, please go read. I have Susan Oyama books throughout the I'll re-upload probably all of this. Remind me if I don't. QC. Come read everything. Discord.gg/DGQC. But this is not pure randomness, but it's also not irrandom. It's not 100% organized, right? It is the process of things. Chance is the raw material for the selective forces. In Logic of Sense, Deleuze goes through one of my favorite Mallarmé poems. A blow of the dice does not abolish chance. This is what he's talking about. The selection process feeds off of the chaos and everything, but the chaos is the material that it's building out of, and that the selective process itself is built out of, and also what the selective process is selecting. So when Nietzsche says that the selection is most often exerted in favor of the large number, he inaugurates a fundamental intuition that will inspire modern thought. Flatly. In Genealogy of Morals, which I did a video on a couple weeks ago, he talks about herd morality. That's what they're referring to here. There's a triumph of mediocrity he talks about, that he's kind of, there's a lot of ways to take. I don't take it how a lot of people do. I tend to take it, again, through this, but it's about really the emergence of it. This idea that the fundamental intuition is the selection process that allows modernity to come about. Modern thought is where we're at. So he inaugurates a fundamental intuition that will inspire modern thought. This is the thing he's talking about. This is the thing they're playing with. It's a lot at once. That Nietzsche reference a lot. But selection is in favor of the large number. It bends towards a mean. It bends towards the normative. The normative is that. It is normative. That's why we like the phrase now. It's why we use it so often. Things are normative isn't just like in a vacuum. Things bend towards it. The selection process of the organization builds towards its own organization. But that's not just socially. It's everything. The selection process itself is the thing. For what he means is that the large numbers or the large aggregates do not exist prior to a selective pressure that might elicit singular lines, but that, quite on the contrary, these large numbers and aggregates are born of this selective pressure that crushes or regularizes the singularities. So we tend to think, and this is why they're not really strict evolutionists or Dawkins types. You tend to be thinking, oh, well, populations of things exist and selection acts on those populations and then the fittest survives. It's like, no, wait. Selections happened. That population was created by the organization of the singularities within. They really, really are pushing on this. Singularities comes from, again, logic of sense for him, but it's the singularities, the elements of the multiplicity. That's the thing. The molecular is captured, crushed, eliminated, or regularized in this very process itself. It's not that the population is made of that process. It's not that the population exists and from that process selection is made. Selection is actually the thing that made the population in the first place. Selection does not presuppose a primary gregariousness. Gregariousness presupposes the selection and is born of it. When we say, that's a dog. When we say that, oh, the dog is evolving, or dogs change, or that's also a dog. Dog's not transcendent. Human's not transcendent. Man is not transcendent. These are, in themselves, what are they? Well, they're also things. They're the gregariousness, but the gregariousness presupposes the selection and is born of the selection itself. The determination that the thing exists that is a dog and what it separates and how it sets out, that very thing to exist in the first place necessitates the selection process having made it. And so it's kind of a recursive forever bullshit game when you start playing it. Well, that's a dog, clearly. Is a bear a dog? It's a great question to ask people, by the way, because the answer is generally no, but the answer is kind of yes, and you can completely fuck with people. Because again, where are the edges of things? What is my body? Where does the edge of my body take place? Well, we've decided as collectively, normatively, at large scale, the selection's already made that my body is literally at the edge of my skin. Well, actually, no, it's not really. We've decided it's actually at the edge of my clothing. No, we've really decided it's at the edge of my property, my land, my car, me, stop pushing on me, my personal space. Well, it's not the space around me. What is a person and the selection that person goes through? It does not That selection does not presuppose the gregariousness. The gregariousness presupposes the selection. Culture, as a selective process of marking or inscription, invents large numbers in whose favor it is exerted. This is white people. What is whiteness? What is whiteness? The whiteness isn't a thing that like existed and then does selections. To get to that point, we start there. We create the category itself, and then selection seems to be presupposed by the gregariousness, but it's not. The culture is the thing that we're talking about. There's a handful of really, really great books I can mention on it, but like culture as all of this shit, it's not that. The structure is... Culture is a selective process of marking or inscription, and it invents the large numbers in whose favor it is exerted. It is not that culture pre-exists it, and from there we determine who's part of the culture. When I say American, I am not... We do. Let me reverse that. Well, right now, we have people in the White House who are saying they're not American, so we can deport them. What the fuck is that thing? Well, they're pretending that the primary gregariousness exists, and from there, selection is made. But to even get to that point, we actually have American that presupposed the selective process that bore it. That's the backward side of it. That's how this gets backwards. And again, this is why they say statistics is not functional, but structural, and concerns chains of phenomena that selection has already placed in a state of partial dependence. A Markov chain necessarily is like this weird stochastic process where future states depend on present states, not a full history. It's effectively a perfect metaphor for how selection creates this weird independence while being incredibly dependent itself. This is playing into all of this, but this is again the organizational patterns, the organized thing that's happening, that's imposed by selective forces. That's the thing a Markov chain does. It creates that. And it necessitates it. Which is fucking crazy. That's what we're doing now. And that's the thing they're pushing for with this last bit. It's why I really like this last little bit. We'll just jump a little bit. The order is not gregarious to selection, but on the contrary, molecular multiplicity, the chaosmosis, forms of selection performing the selection, and then molar or gregarious aggregates result from it. This is the mapping of the theoretical apparatus that they're playing with. This is the process of how these things come to be. And again, you might start to recognize and notice that you have first the molecular multiplicity, and then you have some form of selection or performing selection. Boy, I wonder if there's a second syntheses that is about selection, maybe exclusive or inclusive disjunctions. And then you have a gregarious aggregates that's a result from this selection. This is the process of the organism, the organizing, the organ at large. This is the standard order of things as they function. That's the big deal. That there's a autopoiesis in all of this that they're talking about, that we completely sort of break apart. If social groups that we're in, you're a proletariat, you're working class, you're black, you're white, you're poor, you're rich, whatever. If these things don't exist naturally, if they aren't transcendent categories of things, but instead products themselves of selective pressures that are contingent in that, well, then to go back to my question that ended the last paragraph, then where does political struggle target? How do you target if there's no transcendent group? How do we find goals if there's no transcendent grouping? How do we find shared anything with this? How do we do it? Well, it's because we need to be looking at what those selective mechanisms are that create these organizations. It's not about how do you create a new group, but how do you create a new form of selection that produces different kinds of gregariousness? It's, again, stepping in a very different thing. It's understanding that you're inserting yourself in part of a process that seems to be determined already. because I'm queer or straight or poor or rich or Republican or Democrat or this or that or blah, 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 blah. All these things. But that selection mechanism, that process, it's already done. It's actually happening. And we don't come after. We come after. The organization comes after. So what are the processes of selection that we can change? Because that would completely produce a completely different type of aggregate. Right? So does that nonsense? I don't know what that means, Adam. Let's see. We might be able to do one more paragraph. It makes a bit of sense. If we appeal to people and we say, of the groups that exist, from here we must make selections. I will appeal to you, working class people. Well, wait, who's in the working class? Well, they've kind of already set themselves up, haven't they? Or not, I mean, but what if I'm not in the working class? What if I've been marginalized? I've been told I'm not working class because I've done most white collar-ish jobs my whole life. So working class doesn't strike me as a thing. My selection's already been made socially. In fact, a lot of people, it's the reverse. Elon Musk considers himself working class. If you want to fucking feel how insane that gets. What do you do then if you're pulling from that? Oh, wait, but it's the selection process. It's the selection process. The multiplicities first. Selection comes next, and then the results are the gregariousness. Thank you. That's a completely different way of, again, talking about it. And again, to pull back to the question that ended this last little bit, where it's like, if people are already invested in the social, if people are already part of the groups, if people are invested in very particular everything, then what? What do you do? How do you do it? What do you do? They're continuing to answer that. Understand the forms of selection that perform the selection are the brunt of that. The body without organs is not a monster. It's not a platform for freedom. It's a space of exceptional potential because it is the place where selection is performed. It is. Desiring production works that way. And then we have social machines and other things that, again, shift where that selection's happening. How do we find social groups? How do goals come from that? Well, if we're starting already with the groups made, then we're putting selection after the fact. We're fucking it out of order. What are these qualified forms? Oh, if you're willing, can you go back to what you meant when you spoke about how your reading of Nietzsche's held morality? I was more making a comment on... sorry, I unplugged my headphones. If anyone had been trying to talk, you haven't been going through. People can read Genealogy of Morals as prescriptive rather than descriptive and think that Nietzsche is saying this is how it is, rather than him talking about, hey, this is how it is, and it doesn't have, but how it is and how this comes about is through this mistake. And again, that's the point of what they're making. And it's going to be in this next bit. Nietzsche's thing isn't saying, hey, this is how everything is. It's like, no, here is the process of how everything is, and these things can be changed. That tends to be how I read it. I read it very different. Again, not different from good scholars, but different from shitty assholes on YouTube. What are these qualified forms, formations of sovereignty, as Nietzsche said, that play the role of totalizing, unifying, signifying objectivities that assign organizations lacks and goals? The full bodies determine the different modes of the socius, veritable heavy aggregates of the earth, the despot and capital, full bodies or clothed substances which are distinguished from the full body without organs or the naked matter of molecular desiring production. If we wonder where these forms of force came from, It is evident that they are not to be explained in terms of any goal or end, since they are what determines goals and ends. The form or quality of a given socius, the body of the earth, the body of the despot, the body of money capital, depends on a state or degree of intensive development of the productive forces, insofar as these forces define a man-nature independent of all social formations, or rather common to them all, what the Marxists term the givens of useful labor. The form or quality of the socius is therefore itself produced, but as the unengendered, that is, as the natural or divine precondition of production corresponding to a given degree to which it affixes a structural unity and apparent goals to which it falls back, and whose forces it appropriates, thereby determining the selections, the accumulations, and the attractions without which these forces would not assume a social character. It is indeed in this sense that social production is desiring production itself under determinate conditions. These determinate conditions are thus the forms of gregariousness as a socius or full body, under whose effect the molecular formations constitute molar aggregates. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. You guys ready? It's a lot. What are these qualified forms? Formations of sovereignty, as Nietzsche said, that play the role of totalizing, unifying, signifying objectives, assign organizations lacking goals. What is the selection process? These qualified forms. Again, genealogy of morals. A little bit in other things as well, but genealogy of morals. I just happened to do a video on genealogy of morals, so I'm a little... forgive me if I keep going back to that in Spinoza. It's been a long couple weeks. It's kind of funny. I find myself, as I've been doing the How To series, my brain can't help but read through the books that I like, because I dive through them in like 2 days and I burn my brain, and then the next week I can't think of anything else. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. It's a weird thing. But as qualified forms that Nietzsche's talking about, this is not talking about like abstract structural principles. The qualified forms is these specific historically determined mechanisms they're talking about here. The signifying objectivities is playing with the nature of objectivity and entity. The objectivity, the thing that appears as an objective reality or a discrete object, when it's actually really the result of an organizational process. Look, it's a king. Look at the CEO over there. Oh, look, it's Trump. Whatever. There's objectivity, the signifying objectivity. Objectivity and entity kind of read together. I've heard someone say objectivity and reality. I don't know about that one. But objectivity. This basically is playing into what we were talking about before. We're asking about what are these qualified forms that do the totalizing, unifying, signifying objectivities. What makes those things? The full bodies that determine different modes of the socius, veritable heavy aggregates, the earth, the despot, the capital. This is more of the things that it creates. What is the process that creates these things that seem to determine, that fall back on everything else? That they end up starting to use other things, and you'll have when you go back, and it helps, by the way, to have read this book before you read this book. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. It's true. They've used clothed full body throughout the book. This is the only time they really talk about it, which is very frustrating. But it is the thing they're playing with, the clothed substances or full bodies. Substantial entities that seem like organizational clothes have draped over productive processes, the clothed substances, distinguished from the full body without organs, or the naked matter of molecular desiring production. All of this is, again, playing back towards this. These are the things. How do we get to this? What makes these things? What makes these things? If we wonder where these forms of force come from, it's evidence. It is evident that they are not to be explained in terms of a goal or an end, since they are what determines goals or ends. If we are a revolutionary party, if we are a fascist party, explaining fascism by its goals that doesn't really work because the fascist party is what determines their goals. So you end up doing what Umberto Eco did, where it's like talking about sort of their goals. Here's what they do. Here's kind of the vibes of it. It doesn't really work. That's why fascism is incredibly difficult to define. It's also why liberatory politics equally difficult to define, because when you're talking about these things, any group is going to have varying goals and ends. But if you're talking about like, oh, well, their group is about these things, it's like, no, wait. The group existing, their process of goals and ends, like they're the thing that determines their goals and ends, but you can't explain them in that form. That's not really how it works. It's this is basically shitting on or bringing in Marxist social anthropology, like Grial, Godelier, Strauss, and saying that you need to take a step back. You need to not talk about sort of a functionalist sociology or dialectical idealist history, where history is about a rational purpose coming about. It's not any of those things. Instead, we need to understand that organization itself is a configuration, is a conflagration of power relations rather than institutional structures. It is the result of the process, and the process sort of is built out. They are what determines goals and ends. That setup. I may be overstating it. I may be over sort of rambling it, but that's kind of the thing. Daniel Smith does an essay about it. You joke, but this is a lot of this is, Daniel Smith has done essays on all of this, but the Anti-Oedipus essay he wrote on Body Without Organs is genuinely about all this, and he goes into it actually pretty well. So here's the form or quality of a given socius, the body of the earth, body of the despot, body of capital money, depends on a state or degree of intensive development of productive forces, insofar as these forces define a man nature independent of all social formations, or rather common to them all. This is on its face the blunt thing. The way the social order of society, the form or quality of the socius, the way society is organized, isn't determinative of the goal of that society. The goal of that society is determinative of the form. How the society came together in that way is because of the productive forces within and how those forces defined man nature independent of all other social formations. It's about how as the social world came together, as the social space came together, as people talked, as the world happened, as it organized people, as it set people up, as that process happened, as desire came up, as people talked about how this organization, or we, or I, am different from other things, that separate from other things. That process that they're talking about here, this is about where that line is drawn, that dualism, which again, the dialectic, there's a lot of people who play in sort of that space, but this thing and that line, that's what enables the separation and the creation of this state, comes from that. So this is the state, and the social order is emergent of these interactions and the selective process that determines what is or isn't part of that society. That's a really terrible way of talking about this. It's a really terrible way of talking about this. I need to do better. One sec, I'm just rereading. The form or quality of the socius is therefore itself produced, but as the unengendered, that is, as the natural or divine precondition of production corresponding to a different degree, which it fixes structural unity and parent goals to which it falls back, and is force it appropriates, thereby determining selections. It's just trying to cram everything from like chapters 2 and 3 into a single sentence, and I'm not sure I can explain it better than it's written. The social order, capital, for example, as the social order, the former quality of it, is itself produced, but it's produced as unengendered. It is not born of nothing, but it is also sort of it's seemingly born neutrally, like it exists sort of neutrally. It's seen as a thing that itself is almost miraculous. It is built, and capital exists, or the kings did, or the earth did before that, as this divine or special precondition. The reason we can't get out of capitalism is because we can't think of a time without capital. Necessarily, capital determines everything we do. Capital determines how we think about things. Capital determines everything. The marketplace is how we think and relate to each other wholly, all day, every day. That's the nature of the beast in a full setup. But think about how to get rid of it. It can't, because it is this natural divine precondition of production. It's not, by the way, I'm not saying to try to think of a thing outside of that. Just join me on the journey of that, because the amount that it is that thing that seems to be this quasi-cause, all of it is there. Everything seems to be for capital, but our society isn't built for capital. Capital built our society. Capital falls back on and appropriates the forces. It determines selections, accumulations, and attractions, without which those forces, desire, labor, and others, would have no social character. The nature of the socius is that it is the selection process that has made itself emergently through the processes that it's claiming for itself. That's why they keep referring to it as quasi-cause. These determinate conditions are thus the forms of gregariousness as a socius or full body, under whose full effect the molecular formations constitute molar aggregates. Social production under determinate conditions, considering determined social concrete moments. That is desiring production. Social production is desiring production when made determinate. And those determinate conditions are forms of gregariousness under whose effect that it constitutes. And it constitutes through the process that conditions it to be that thing. The molecular, the machinic unconscious, is just doing whatever the fuck it's doing. We are pulling from it and extricating from it and selecting from it the things that fit as we understand it, the thing that we're within. And, oh, this is capital. Capital wants this. This is the goal of capital, is to do these things, all of this. It's like, no. Capital emerged from and then claims all the rest of it. Capital emerged from and does the rest of it. Useful labor is the phrasing they use here. And it's Marx's thing. Like, useful labor is like the concrete labor versus like the abstraction of labor. Useful labor is, I want to say like outside of history. It's necessarily people do things. They weave, they farm, they build, they sculpt. Abstract labor did not exist outside of capital, because we can talk about labor in terms of how many hours are you working. Like that's a very different beast of a thing, because we didn't do that. This homogenization of time units that labor can have now, or how we talk about the number of man months a project may take. That's not, I would make I'm going to make a table. I'll get back to you when I'm done. That thing, useful labor, is not the same as the abstraction of labor. And they're trying to draw a line in the same way between the way that these productive forces work, between the concrete useful labor and the way that labor has been sort of extracted, where the forms of force come from. It's evident they're not to be explained in goals or ends. That's the thing. The form or quality of a given socius depends on state or degree of intensive development of productive forces, insofar as the forces define a man nature independent of all social formations, or rather common to them all. What the Marxists term the givens of useful labor. That's the thing. We're talking about beyond literally what I'm just going to end up over explaining the same sentence like 20 times. I think I'll pass on doing that. Yeah. So, the reason this matters, again, to pull back, I'll pull back. We're talking in lieu of schizoanalysis and the way that it functions, and we're talking about the processes. We've got the rules of how schizoanalysis needs to work, or how we should take things, destruction of the symbolic and the narrative, and the sort of mapping of intensities and indices of desire as sort of directional or almost like mathematical of attraction in multitudes. And then we have these kinds of things. There's no such thing, and it's important for the theses of schizoanalysis when we get to the second task. But the first one was all desire is necessarily invested. At minimum is socially historically invested. When we talk about how it's invested or how the selection happens, we need to get away from the way that we think about these things as though people are part of a group, instead of the fact that the group, because a group didn't choose people, the creation of the group happened, and then the selection process determined its existence. The investment came first. It's like chicken and the egg stuff. The investments came first as a thing. Then the group, or the unengendered creation of the socius or the social order or other things, fall back on and appropriate these forces, determine selections and accumulations and attractions, without which these forces would not assume a social character. It's indeed in this sense, social production is desire and production under determinate conditions, and these determinate conditions are thus the forms of gregariousness as a socius or full body, under whose effect the molecular formations constitute molar aggregates. I'm just going to read the next sentence in the next paragraph. Now the second thesis. Within the social investments, we will distinguish the unconscious libidinal investment of group or desire and the preconscious investment of class or interest. This is where they start breaking it up. When we start understanding that there's the unconscious libidinal investment of group or desire and the preconscious investment of class or interest. What is the selection process where you determine where you're at? How does a person know what side they're on? That's the question. Well, how do you know what side you're on? How do you know where you're at in society? We don't have the earth, where the earth sort of socius, we determine relationally. That's not how it works. Well, we don't have the king telling us that you are a lord or you are a peasant or you are a this or that. We have capital, and capital's market forces. You're free to tell me what anyone is, but the idea there's a bourgeois is really troublesome now. Really troublesome. It's one of the great challenges for tankies is it doesn't really work, because poor people are not necessarily proletariats and rich people aren't necessarily bourgeois. People who are comfortable aren't necessarily bourgeois. What do these things mean? Well, on the one hand, there is the unconscious libidinal investment of group or desire, which is again what we've talked about, or preconscious investments of class or interest. The latter, which is the preconscious investment, passes by way of large social goals, concerns the organism and the collective organs, including the arranged vacuoles of lac. A class is defined by a regime of syntheses, a state of global connections, exclusive disjunctions, and residual conjunctions that characterize the aggregate being considered. Membership in a class refers to the role in production or anti-production, to the place in the inscription, to the portion that is due the subjects. The preconscious class interest thus itself refers to the selection of flux, the detachment of codes, and the subjective remains or revenues. From this viewpoint, it is indeed true that an aggregate comprises practically only a single class, the class which has an interest in a given regime, The other class can constitute itself only by a counter-investment that creates its own interest in terms of new social aims, organs, and means, and a new possible state of social syntheses. You can be the cool kids or not. But you can not be cool by going the opposite. You can join in the normative, or you can't invest in, there's no second option. The regime's there. So you can counter-invest, creating your own interest in terms of new social aims, organs, and means, and a possible state of social syntheses. Whence the necessity for the other class to be represented by a party apparatus that assigns these aims and means and affects the revolutionary break in the preconscious domain, the Leninist break, for example. In this domain of preconscious investments of class or interest, it is therefore easy to distinguish what is reactionary or reformist, or what is revolutionary. But those who have an interest in this sense are always of a smaller number than those whose interest, in some fashion, is had or represented. The class, from the standpoint of praxis, is infinitely less numerous or less extensive than the class taken in its theoretical determination. How are all the proletariats fighting the bourgeoisie doing? Then those who have an interest are always of a smaller number than those whose interest is had. I truly represent the working class. I truly represent the working class. Yep. No, you don't. No one does. It's not how it works. The class, from the standpoint of praxis, is infinitely less numerous or less extensive than the class taken in its theoretical determination. Look, working class means anyone who does hard labor. Yeah, but then those people are not with you. They aren't working with you at all. They're not invested in anything. Oh, yes, but they don't know. They're just had the wool pulled over their eyes because of ideology of capitalism. They just don't know as good as me. I am a very smart person. I am very, very smart. Whence the subsisting contradictions within the dominant class, the class pure and simple. This is obvious in the capitalist regime where, for example, primitive accumulation can take place only for the benefit of a restricted fraction of the whole of the dominant class, but is just as obvious for the Russian Revolution with its formation of a party apparatus. And this, they're saying it's not just the working class, it's everyone. The capitalist class doesn't, we joke, we say there's class solidarity. That's only because their personal goals tend to align, because the more that they fuck everyone else, the more they tend to be rich. But you can also see very cleanly when they turn on each other. A lot. That's the deal. The capitalist regime, where primitive accumulation can take place only for the benefit of a restricted fraction of the whole of the dominant class. They have a footnote here. Footnote. Maurice Dobb. There are reasons why the full flowering of industrial capitalism demands not only a transfer of titles to wealth into the hands of bourgeois, but a concentration of the ownership of wealth into much fewer hands. This is part and parcel. That's straight up out of Marx too, but that's the big deal. It's a Trump Elon of 2025. Sure, it's the there are business people. The head of the Waltons took out an ad against Trump's tariffs because he's doing things damaging to tariffs, but it's because he wants to, assert power in other ways, and people who aren't in those businesses don't give a fuck about tariffs in the same way. They're all individually nightmarish in the same way. But again, the left, feel free to, do I have to? Do I even have to talk about that and how horrifying it is? How do certain people whose interest is objectively reactionary come to affect a preconscious revolutionary investment? The people who voted for Trump because they wanted everything to burn down. And then turned out they voted for Trump a second time because they were kind of okay with it turned out. No, it's not pre-recorded. I just don't shut up. I just don't shut up. It's not pre-recorded though. There is a delay on YouTube though. So be ready for that delay as a thing. This is the thrust. This is how they get to that last little bit, because we were talking about, like, the groups seem to be organized. Capitalism doesn't have a shortage of groups. How many people are in one group or another in the realm of what we would call identity politics, race or class or working class, true working class, or tradesman versus day laborer. Feel free to just like find where you belong and enjoy that. But that thing didn't just come around. It wasn't like a predetermined thing. It's not, there wasn't always a bourgeois or any of that shit. There wasn't always any of this. These are necessarily classes determined socially by the social systems that determined them. So wait. Why would that's the problem. The selection process is the thing to be looking at. And that's to go back to this, and then we'll probably end for the day. The second thesis, within the social investments, we distinguish between unconscious libidinal investments of group or desire and preconscious investments of class or interest. Large social goals versus molecular sort of passions. Okay? And that's the thing to be watching for next week. Because we are going to end today. I'm going to be streaming later tonight, which I'm excited about. Because I got to earn a couple dollars. It's been a long few days and all of that fun stuff. If you have any desire to support what I do, or you like these things, or you get anything out of them, I would appreciate greatly if you want to go ahead and jump in and say super chat, membership. All those things are very, very lovely. Of course, Patreon's the best. Patreon.com/DGQC. If you head over and you go, give $5, $3 every month, the law of large numbers applies. Your $3 may not seem like a great deal to you, and if you can't afford it, it would be appreciated, because in aggregate, these things do change my ability to do this more full time and dedicate more time and not have a life of nightmarish stress. There was a lot of this discussion. Tonight I'm going to be doing some reaction streams and some other stuff. If you haven't, yesterday my video on Spinoza's ethics went out. Was it yesterday? God, this time it was, last week was Nietzsche. This was Spinoza. Fuck. That one was a lot because I started rereading the ethics in preparation for it like a few weeks ago lightly. And then I'm like sitting there like, how do I actually turn this into something? Because I need to make a point. Because I could literally talk about Spinoza for hours. And when you go back and I didn't do the first 8, but even just the first 6. And it's like, hey, here's the deal with how philosophy operates. And it's why it's important. When we're talking, this continues out of this discussion, actually, because this is the thing about the selection process, is this goes with the idea of the 4 quadrants of knowns and unknowns. You have your known knowns. You have things that you are aware of. I'm aware that I am tired. I'm aware that I'm aware that I'm tired. Then there's like unknowns, things that you don't know that you know. And then there's known unknowns, things that you know that you don't know. That 4th category fucks everyone. Zizek does the best talk about this, but I think it applies here. It's the unknown knowns. It's when you don't realize your assumptions or the axiomatics that are structuring how you make sense of things, or the rules through which you're setting things up. If you don't realize that and how absolutely formative they are, I think Spinoza's first 6 definitions does a really good job of showing you, hey, by the way, all of this stuff is, you can agree or disagree. Like a Sirius who does a lot of philosophy stuff was like, so why accept this over anything else? And it's like, that's the point. Like, the point is that these things are at that axiomatic non-proof level. And if you don't see that, it means you're actually making assumptions and selections of what is true, what is important, what is interesting, not based on the knowledge of what you know, but instead the lack of knowledge in the selection process itself. And that lack of knowledge in the selection process is incredibly dangerous. Like, incredibly dangerous for people. To say the fucking least. To absolutely say the least. But I think we'll send you guys over to, we'll see. Go tell Sunday I say hello. And we'll send you over there because I need that in the background, and then I'll be streaming a little bit later tonight. Thank all of you very much. It is always wonderful, and it's like my favorite thing, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate you, and I'll see you guys all soon enough.